What's up, guys? This is Albert with the Rally Rats crew. Just wanted to go over our 80 series Land Cruiser here. This thing is affectionately known as Misfire the 80. Interesting story with this truck. This truck actually started out as the least expensive Land Cruiser for sale in Nashville. A buddy of mine who runs the Nashville Cars and Coffee used to vlog back in the day, and he found this thing for sale. I think it was on Craigslist back then. And he did a vlog and he went and saw it, and I was following it, and he came back on camera and said, there is no way that he is buying that truck. He said that truck is so far gone, there is nothing that can be done with it, and that guy's never gonna get as much as he was asking for it. So I showed up that day, hit up the dude, went and looked at it, lowballed him a bit, ended up with the cheapest Land Cruiser for sale in Nashville. And yeah, it's had a few things done to it, but I like where it's come. I like where it's gone. So anyway, the big news with this truck, the big thing that we did is we swapped this old 3F motor for an LS engine. There's a couple reasons for that, right? The 3F is legendary for being slow, let's say. It's quite a bit underpowered, but because of that, it was very reliable. However, if we're on a trip somewhere, if we're doing the Red Clay Rally, if we're doing some of the overland trips that we usually like to do, it's really hard to find parts for. So we swapped out that 3F for an LC9. So it's a 5.3 liter aluminum block LS motor, makes about 300 horsepower. We put a GM transmission behind it and mated it all to the Toyota transfer case. It is controlled by a Holley Terminator X Max system, and I'll show you guys here in a little bit some of the reasons why we did that. But let's start from the front here. We'll talk about a couple things that we've done to it. We'll go to the back and just kind of do a quick walk around with the truck. So up front, of course, we've got the classic ARB bumper. You know, you got to have one if you have an 80 series, right? If you got a Land Cruiser, you got an ARB bumper. Every light bulb on this truck, be it exterior or interior, has been swapped out and switched to diode dynamic stuff. They make some rad LED light bars and accessories, and we're really happy to have their stuff on the rig here. Of course, Factor 55 recovery gear up front. I'll tell you what, why don't we pop the hood? We kind of got off the subject of the engine, but let's just circle right around to it. Like most 80 series, the hood release doesn't work that well. Under hood here, as I mentioned, we've got the 5.3 liter engine. It's been upgraded internally with a couple components from Brian Tooley Racing, so we added their Stage 1 turbo cam. Little hint as to what we've got going on here, or what we've got coming in the future. We've got upgraded dual valve springs. We've got hardened push rods. We increased the ring gap quite a bit to, I think, 28 thousandths, all in preparation for a single turbo kit that we're doing here probably in a couple months. Up front, we made sure we had as much cooling as possible, so we went with a Ron Davis radiator, great big aluminum radiator. Behind that, originally it had some Spall fans, which are good fans, but these are much better. This is a pulse width modulated setup from Steel Racing Products. Those pulse width modulated fans are rad. They are controlled via pulse width modulation, I guess. So what that means is they draw less amperage, right? So they start at 0 RPM and then they ramp up to their max RPM. They flow about 20% more than the Spall fans that we had before, but draw only about 15 amps. The previous fans that we had were pulling about 50 amps per fan. 2 fans, that was a lot of amperage. So we were busting fuses, we were busting relays, we were having a lot of issues there with the electrical loads that we were putting on the system. And so this is a much, much smarter way to go. Also up front here, sort of unrelated to the engine, but related to what's under hood, we have a dual battery setup. So we have dual AGMs. They're controlled by a Blue Sea Smart solenoid, I believe it is. So we have control inside the truck for that. So we can actually link the two batteries together and jumpstart the truck. But we can also run all of our 12-volt accessories off of the aux battery without any fear of draining our main starting battery. Pretty rad setup, pretty rad setup. But behind that, we've got, as I mentioned before, the GM transmission. So it's a 4L65. It's been upgraded with all kinds of stuff internally to handle a bunch of power. Triple disc lockup converter, and a couple of other things for towing. We usually carry a big camp trailer behind us when we're on these trips, so we need as much, I guess, torque capacity as possible so that we're efficient on the road. Had to completely revamp the cooling system and do a bunch of neat stuff under hood. Moving on from under the hood, we have a full Icon vehicle dynamics, remote resi, CDCV adjustable suspension system. Really love these shocks, 2.5-inch diameter shocks. They're, again, CDCV adjustable, so it allows us to sort of tailor the ride for the sort of terrain that we're driving in. Of course, we've got black Rhino bead locks and some 35-inch Maxxis Razor tires. These things are rad. Hardly ever have any issues with traction. The only issues with traction we had is whenever our lockers weren't working, but that's another story for another day. Underneath the truck, we've done a couple things from Keith. He makes some rad products. So there is a caster correcting bracket for the radius arms. What it does is it actually lengthens the wheelbase slightly by moving the radius arm mounting point forward and down. Highly recommend that for any 80 series owners. And he makes some other products for 5th Gen 4Runner GX, you know, a bunch of other platforms. White knuckle sliders. We built our own skid plate setup underneath. We've got bowfins, cruisers, roof rack, and of course, the Sherpa Max Trax mounts. Those things are rad. They allow us to get up there and snap those Max Trax off if we ever need them to, you know, dig somebody else out or something, whatever. Back here we have the Panhard correction kit from Keith. Pretty cool setup. So what it does is it lowers the mounting point on the chassis side and raises it on the frame side for the Panhard bar in order to get a more neutral position for the Panhard bar. Pretty important with lifted live axle trucks. So again, whether that's your GX, 4Runner, Land Cruiser, whatever it is, it makes a big difference in handling. So definitely check out that product. The whole truck has been re-geared, and I forget the gear ratio that we went with. I think it was 456 or something like that. But either way, it's been re-geared, and then we've got ARB air lockers front and rear for the truck. The center diff lock had to be modified slightly to work with the GM setup. It was kind of a pain, but our wiring wizards took care of that. Back here, we've got the Avid off-road rear bumper setup. I love this bumper setup for a couple of reasons, but the primary reason that we went with this is they offered the best solution for towing that I have seen. So like I mentioned before, we're always towing our camp trailer behind us, and so it was absolutely critical that we had the capacity to pull that trailer and have the proper load rating. And this accomplishes that for us while also giving us plenty of clearance off-road and allowing for the swing outs. Pretty rad setup. Underneath there's an extra 24 gallons, I believe, of fuel. That's afforded by the Long Range Automotive auxiliary fuel tank. That thing's pretty rad. So it's an aux tank. It has its own pump. You hit a button inside and it fills our main tank. So counting the approximately 20 gallons, I think it might be 18, but like 20 gallons on the main tank, and then like 24 gallons with the aux tank, and then another 15 gallons on the back bumper here. We've got about 55 gallons of fuel whenever we go out with this thing. So, you know, it's really nice, honestly, to just be able to hit a button and then fill your main tank and not have to have that sort of range anxiety. Nobody likes that. So yeah, that is the back of the truck and the rear bumper setup. Let's take a look inside here at the drawers and some of the 12 volt stuff that we have going on. So back here in the back, we've got a custom box and custom drawer system made for us. So I had a couple of requirements whenever I had this built. I'm from the 90s and I love listening to music, and when we're on the road it helps to be entertained. So I had the idea that in the front of this box I wanted to integrate our stereo system. So in a moment you'll see that the front of this box actually houses a portion of the subwoofers for our stereo setup, but also affords us plenty of storage for tools, gear, parts, etc. And then serves as a mounting, of course, for our fridge slide out. So we have a 75-liter Dometic dual zone fridge. This is cool because you can configure it so that half of it is a freezer, half of it is a fridge. I've got 6-year-old twin girls, so having ice cream on the trail, pretty cool. We can control that via Bluetooth, monitor the temps and that sort of thing. We also integrated on the sides here all of our 12 volt accessories and I guess power junction. So we've got a huge 12 volt cable that comes to the back, and then from there we can grab power for our ARB dual compressor, our power outlets. We can power, of course, the fridge, and then grab power for our inverter here. We can grab power for the amplifiers for the stereo system. We can do a lot with it. So again, it was one of the things that I wanted to do back here with this drawer system, was to have everything sort of contained, integrated, and set up so that way there isn't much fooling with stuff or things getting in the way whenever we're on the trail, either at the Red Clay Rally or doing our big expedition style trips. Clutter inside of a vehicle bothers the heck out of me. So on the side here, we've got our power tank set up so that way we can quickly air up and air down the tires. But one of the other things that we can do with the power tank, because of the pressures that it has, is use the Pro Eagle CO2 jack. So that thing is rad. You just throw it underneath a wheel or an axle, and then hit the valve on the jack, lifts the vehicle up, and you can easily change a tire without much issue. Extra storage is always a good thing. So right here we have a Hurricane Fab storage box. We keep all of our air hoses and all of that stuff in here, tire gauges and all that sort of thing. And yeah, it's pretty well set up. It's finally where I have it where I kind of know where everything is. We've got all the tools that we need. We can access things easily, and it's sort of logically laid out, or at least, in my head, it's as logically laid out as possible. WeBoost setup, CB. We've got all the comms that we need. Up front, we've got Midland 40-watt GMRS, which we use on the trail to communicate with one another. All right, so moving to the interior here, we've got a couple things going on. It's pretty rad. I'm big on data. And so one of the things that we wanted to do with the Holley Terminator X is be able to configure our gauges the way that we want. So with this turbo system that we have planned, and the dual Hellcat fuel pumps that are in the tank, and the fuel pressure sensors that we have under the hood and all that sort of stuff, we want to be able to see that. So this Holley affords us this big Pro Dash. So it's a digital dash and it's very configurable. We can go through and set up boost gauges and temperatures and fuel pressure gauges and all these sorts of not just readouts, but also triggers for the fans to come on at certain temperatures or whenever we do different things. And that's important to me, right? I'm a mechanic, I'm a technician, so I always want to have as much data as possible. Another thing that we did is we added the Blue Sea OLED voltmeters in there. That way I can watch everything live and see exactly what the truck's doing with the batteries. Of course, I like having control here from the Blue Sea smart solenoid, and then having a little readout there for my aux tank. It just satisfies my little OCD nature and want to have as much data as possible. I love having the tablet mounted in there with the GMRS so we can watch Gaia, and then having the Kenwood radio that has the maps built in, so we don't have to have a cell signal or Wi-Fi or anything like that. We always have access to maps. And when we're on the rally, whenever we're trying to move fast and quickly acquire data, it really helps to have a couple of maps up all the time, so that way you have different, not perspectives, but I guess you have one zoomed in and then one from a wider view. That way you can really hone in on your trails and that sort of thing whenever you're trying to move quickly. We also have in there our controller for the S-Pod, so the I guess 8-channel or 8-circuit S-Pod. So on that S-Pod we can control our compressor, the front and rear lockers, all of the lights, and we can key on and off the Wii Boost. Pretty rad setup. I would say that the one thing we probably didn't talk about much is the cooling on top. We talked about it on front, but we didn't talk about it on the top of the truck. So initially we were having some issues with the transmission getting hot. We solved that eventually after experimenting with a couple different cooler setups up front by adding a transmission cooler on top of the roof rack there. And the way that we did that was by running a couple big AN lines up to the derail cooler that's mounted up top, sort of trophy truck style, and then adding, of course, another Steel Racing Products PWM fan up there. It has solved all of our cooling issues for the transmission, and we're really happy with the way that it's come. So that's it. Hope you all enjoyed it. There's a ton of more stuff underneath this truck. I could go on for hours about it, but it's come a long way, and we've still got a little ways to go. We've almost got it to where we're happy with it, but I always think that there's probably going to be more. So thanks for watching. If you guys have any questions, hit us up on Instagram. We tend to respond there a little bit more frequently. And stay tuned for some more of these rig walkarounds. Some of the other teammates are going to be showing off some of their stuff as well. It'll be rad. We're looking forward to it. Thanks a bunch.